Ever get that feeling like, there are these powerful forces kind of secretly shaping the world, and we only ever see, like, the tip of the iceberg?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's exactly what we're diving into today.
Oh, really?
This is the deep dive into a group you probably haven't even heard of. They're called Ziklag.
Okay.
And we're using this, honestly, incredible investigative report by ProPublica and document it as our guide.
They really outdid themselves this time, didn't they?
No kidding. Leaked emails, we've got strategy memos, even like internal fundraising pitches. It's the kind of stuff that usually stays buried.
Yeah, behind closed doors, for sure.
And after you hear this, you'll understand why they wanted to keep it all under wraps.
I'm intrigued already. What's the deal with this group, this Ziklag?
So, at first glance, Ziklag, they present themselves as this exclusive club for Christian donors, They want to influence American life, very broadly speaking.
Okay, sounds pretty standard so far. A lot of groups say that. What makes them different? What makes them, iceberg tip-worthy?
Oh, just a few things. First, to even get in the door, you have to have a net worth of at least $10 million. Minimum.
Whoa, 10 million. That's not your average church group.
Definitely not. And get this, they're kind of modeling themselves after the Koch brothers network.
Interesting. So big money, political influence, but with a religious angle.
Exactly. And they've seen their money explode, by the way. We're talking from $1.6 million to almost $10 million in annual revenue just in the past few years.
Wow. That's a meteoric rise. And it's a charity. That kind of secrecy and that kind of funding, it makes you wonder what they're really up to. What are they trying to achieve that requires that level of, I don't know, stealth?
Right. And that's where their whole Dominion thing comes in. And it's based on this idea called the Seven Mountains Mandate.
Dominion? Sounds a little intense.
It's intense. Think about it. 7 mountains. Each one represents a sphere of influence, right? So you've got government, business, media, education.
Okay, I see where you're going with this. They're not just talking about politics, are they? This is about shaping, well, everything.
It's like they want to control every aspect of our lives, from the laws we live by, the news we consume, even like what our kids are learning in school.
And don't forget the arts and even science and technology. Those are mountains too, right?
Oh, yeah, they didn't leave those out.
It's more than just influencing a few policies here or there, isn't it? It's about controlling the very fabric of society, the culture at large.
Exactly. Wild, right?
Wild is one word for it.
It's just, I don't know, it feels so manipulative. Like they're taking people's deeply held beliefs, these really personal things, and just using them, like tools.
It's a tale as old as time, unfortunately. But what makes Ziklag so different, so potentially dangerous, is that combination, right? The scale of what they want to do, the dominion over everything, plus the money they have to throw around, and then on top of it all, this whole secrecy thing.
Right, because it's not like they're just another political action committee, right? Those are out in the open, more or less. Ziklag, they're hiding behind this charity status, which, legally speaking, seems kind of fishy.
Very fishy. And this is where things get really interesting from a legal perspective. So charities, or 501c3 organizations, that's the official term.
Right, the tax-exempt folks.
Exactly. They get that sweet tax-exempt status because they're supposed to be working for the public good, helping everyone, not just plain politics.
So, like, my local animal shelter, they're a 501c3, but a group that's just trying to get their candidate elected, that's a no-go.
Precisely. And the IRS, they've got rules about this, very clear guidelines about what charities can and can't do when it comes to politics. They can do some voter education stuff, but it has to be nonpartisan, like how to register, that kind of thing.
It makes sense, right? We don't want some billionaire donor getting a tax break, basically, just to fund their favorite politician.
Exactly. It's about keeping things fair.
Yeah.
And preventing this abuse of the system.
Okay, so that's the law, and it sounds pretty straightforward. But Ziklag, it sounds like they're really pushing the limits here.
Pushing is putting it mildly.
Well, that's why these ProPublica's documented articles are so important. They didn't just lay out what Ziklag is doing. They actually got tax law experts to look at this stuff, to see if it, legally holds up.
And the consensus, not looking good for Ziklag.
Not good at all. Give us the dirt. What are these experts saying?
Okay, so get this. Philip Hackney, he's a tax law professor at the University of Pittsburgh. He said, and I'm quoting here, "I am troubled about a tax-exempt charitable organization that's set up in its main operation seems to be to get people to win office."
Ouch. Not exactly a glowing review.
Nope. And
Yeah.
it gets worse. Marcus Owens, he used to run the IRS division that actually oversees these tax-exempt groups.
Oh, so he knows his stuff.
He knows his stuff. He said, they're planning an election effort That's not a 501c activity.
So we've got these legal experts basically saying, yeah, this smells bad. But even if we set aside the legal stuff, isn't there something just fundamentally wrong here? This group, with all this money, all this secrecy, they're basically trying to buy our democracy.
And that's where we need to zoom out a little bit, look at the bigger picture. Because Ziklag, they're just one example, right? They're
Yeah.
part of this much larger, and I'd argue much more concerning trend, which is the rise of Christian nationalism.
Okay, so let's unpack that a bit, because
Yeah.
not everyone listening might, be familiar with that term. What exactly are we talking about when we say Christian nationalism?
So in a nutshell, it's the belief that America is, at its core, a Christian nation. And not just that, but that it should be explicitly Christian. Our laws, our institutions, everything should be based on, and this is important, a very specific, often quite narrow interpretation of Christian values.
So it's not just about people of faith having a voice in public life, which is obviously totally fine, totally their right. It's more like they want to be the only voice.
It's the difference between pluralism, many voices, many faiths, and this idea that America has a divinely ordained mission and everyone needs to get on board with their vision.
And it's not hard to see how that kind of thinking, it can be used to justify some pretty scary stuff.
Exactly. Discrimination,
Yeah.
authoritarianism, it's all in there.
And this is where Ziklag gets really scary, because they're not just talking about this stuff, they're actually trying to make it happen. They've got the money, they've got the organization, and they're not afraid to use it.
And let's not forget the dark money aspect of all of this, because we don't know who all of their donors are.
Right.
There's no transparency, no accountability.
Right, because it's a charity, so they don't have to, disclose who's giving them millions of dollars.
Exactly. And dark money, that just means political spending by groups that are basically operating in the shadows. We don't know who's pulling the strings, what their real motives are.
It's like trying to have a debate with someone who's wearing a mask, right? You can't see their face, you don't know if they're being sincere or if they've got something to hide.
And that lack of transparency, it's poison to a democracy. It erodes trust. It fuels these crazy conspiracy theories. It makes it so hard to even talk about the issues that matter because nobody knows who to believe anymore.
So we've got this perfect storm brewing. Christian nationalism on the rise, dark money flooding our elections, and groups like Ziklag, they're using all of it to reshape our country in their image. What do we even do with that information? How do we even begin to fight back against something this big, this entrenched?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And I wish I had a simple answer, a magic solution, but the reality is it's complicated. There's no one-size-fits-all solution.
But we can't just give up, right? We can't just throw our hands up and say, well, the system's rigged, so why even bother?
You're absolutely right. Apathy, cynicism, that's playing right into their hands. We can't let them win by default. But we also need to be realistic about the challenges. This is going to be a long fight. And it's going to take all of us working together to make a difference.
So where do we even begin if we want to dismantle this whole edifice, the Christian nationalism, the dark money, the manipulation? What are the pressure points? Where do we even start pushing back? It's overwhelming, honestly. We're standing here with squirt guns and they've got this whole Death Star operation going on.
I know it can feel that way. It's easy to feel outmatched. But we do have something powerful on our side.
Oh, yeah. What's that? Hope? A really good Twitter thread.
Those help. But I was thinking knowledge. We have the knowledge of how these groups operate, and that's where we start pushing back.
Okay, so how do we use that knowledge?
Awareness. It's the first step. The more people understand the tactics at play, the harder it is for these groups to function in the shadows. They rely on secrecy.
So shining a light on the cockroaches, so to speak, make it so they can't hide.
Exactly. And it's not just about knowing the facts, right? It's about understanding the why.
The why.
Yeah, why is this Dominion strategy so important to them? Why go to all this trouble? What are they ultimately trying to achieve? And then how does that impact, everyone else? If they get their way, what happens to the rest of us?
Because this isn't just about winning one election, right? It's like they want to remake the whole country.
Exactly. They're playing a long game, so we need to be ready to do the same. Which means supporting organizations like ProPublica and Documented. They're out there doing the real investigative journalism, holding these powerful groups accountable.
Yeah, those guys are doing the Lord's work, honestly. What else? What can everyday people do?
Be smart about the information you're consuming. Question everything, even your own biases, and be willing to have those tough conversations.
Oh, even with people we disagree with.
Especially with people we disagree with. That's how we bridge divides and hopefully, find solutions that work for everybody, not just a select few.
I guess that's how a democracy is supposed to work, huh?
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got support investigative journalism, have those tough conversations. Oh, and voting. Can't forget voting. That's kind of the bare minimum, right?
It should be. But you'd be surprised how many people just don't bother. Vote in every election, big or small. School board, president, everything. Make your voice heard.
And not just like a random vote. Actually, know what you're voting for, read up on the issues, the candidates, all of it.
Because if we're not paying attention, if we're not engaged, then groups like Ziklag, well, they're going to be more than happy to make those decisions for us, and it probably won't be pretty.
Definitely not. So we've got to stay vigilant, stay informed, and, well, I guess keep diving deeper. That's kind of our thing.
It's a good thing.
All right, that's it for this deep dive. Big thanks to Expert Speaker's Name for joining us, and to all of you listening, stay curious, and we'll see you next time.